Our next speaker for this year's Jiu-Jitsu Con Talk Series is Gracie. Hodger is a 10-time world champion and an IBJJF Hall of Famer. Throughout his career, Hodger not only won major championships, but he did so in dominant fashion, submitting the majority of his opponents via submission. To start things off, Hodger, I want to talk about your process of coming to that level of self-belief to achieve the results that you achieved in competition.
I think it's something that, you set yourself as a goal. I think it's, I always knew what I wanted to be ever since I was very young, So I set myself a goal, and I dedicated my life daily training to achieve that goal, which is, is to be the best jiu-jitsu fighters there was. So it was a consistency of training every day, dedication. You'll get where we want.
So you mentioned that you set that goal really early in life. Can you talk about how early you set those goals and then when you really started to believe that achieving that goal of being the best in the world was possible?
I always believed that was possible. Ever since I was a young age, when I wasn't really training much, I was away from jiu-jitsu. And I remember, my uncle Hilon was incentivizing me to train. I was a bit chubby at the time. And he put in my mind, you're a Gracie, you gotta train, you gotta have a healthy lifestyle. And that, I was about 15 years old, and that really got into my mind. I was in the South with him on holidays. And when I go back to Rio, to my house, I was already with a different mindset. I think the time that I spent with him, it really got into me. It's what I'm doing with my life. I'm a Gracie. I need to be the best. I gotta train. And the path started there.
So obviously you're a Gracie family member and your family had a huge impact on your desire to achieve success in Jiu-Jitsu. So can you talk about how that process kind of played out and what kind of pressure you felt being a Gracie and having to achieve the results that you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, the thing about being a Gracie is being born under pressure. I think everyone expects you to be a fighter, to train. I think my whole life when I was a kid, every person that I met outside the family, the first question that they always asked me, do you train? I think I heard that question, my whole life as a kid. And imagine saying I don't train. You almost feel like ashamed, I'm a Gracie, and everyone constantly asks me, do you train, do you train? And I'm going to say no. But it's coming from the Gracie family, it's, you're born in the mat. The first thing you see is your uncles arguing and fighting, rolling the mat. That's where we solve the problem between among ourselves. So it's something special. I grew up with that, so it's difficult to see any other way. And I think naturally when I was getting older, that was the path I chose to follow.
So when people watch you compete, you look so calm and cool and collected. So it doesn't really look like you felt a lot of pressure. So what were some of the strategies that you used to be so calm for your matches?
I think that has a lot to do with my personality. I think I'm naturally a calm person. I'm not very hyper. And, competing helped me be even more. It's, being nervous is normal. I think, I try to hide as much as I can also. I get, everybody gets a bit nervous. So, I do get nervous when I fight. But I try to keep like a poker face without anyone. I don't want no one ever to see what goes inside me, especially as you start walking to the mat. That's when you put a poker face, or your opponents, they can never see what goes inside you, especially when you're tired. When same thing, you want to hide how tired you are. You don't want to, look like you're very tired because, I think every time my opponent looks very tired, that gives me more energy, knowing that he's okay, he's failing, he's tired. So I think it plays the other way around. So I always try to hide a lot. So, yeah, it's being tired is normal. Nervous is normal. But I think my personality helped me a lot fighting. I'm very calm. And I think I always try to put my emotions in check. I think especially fighting, to show emotions when you're fighting is a mistake. That, you only play against you when you're fighting. So I think I try to shut that out of my, of my mind.
So would you say that was part of your personality before you even had these big goals in Jiu-Jitsu, that your personality was always kind of calm and you just kind of carried that into your matches?
Yeah, of course. I think, it's the hardest thing is for you to stay calm under a critical situation. That's the hardest thing. When everything goes, everything goes wrong, like if you keep a calm mind straight, you can see things more clearly. I think when we start getting nervous, we get, our judgments get clouded, so we start making mistakes. I think especially on those critical moments, like, you're losing the fight, or it's near the end. There's many fights that I was losing until, not many, but, I remember fighting the Worlds, I was losing to the last minute. And the whole time I stayed calm, and I was able to reverse and submit my opponent on the last minute of the fight. But I was losing, and it's something that you see very often. You see all the fighters, when they start getting closer to the end, that they see they behind, then they start making a lot of mistakes. They lose kind of control of the fight because they desperate to score, and that clouds the judgment. And I mean. Yeah, that was one of the main things, very, very important for me to kind of, keep a straight mind and try to always think as clearly as I can. So that helped me massively.
So let's get into your philosophy towards competition. I know it looked like when you were competing, it didn't look like you had ever a strategy to win by points. It looked like you were always trying to progress forward until you got to the submission. And so can you talk about your philosophy going into matches? What was your goal in terms of how you're going to finish your opponent?
Yeah, I think for me to win my opponent, for me to be better than my opponents, I have to submit them. Because that's the only way that you can prove you're a better fighter. If you win by points, you're better at that fight. That doesn't mean that you're better than your opponent. If you win by one advantage, one time, so that means the fight is very close. So that means technically you're very close from your opponent. So for me, the only way that I could prove to myself that I'm better than my opponents, no questions asked, no doubt, is through submissions. I think when I look back, all the great fighters in my family, like Halls, when you hear about them, why they were better, because they're submitting everybody. Every time I heard about Rickson, everyone knows Rickson's an amazing fighter. Why? Because he submits all his opponents. So that was the same path I wanted to follow. So for me to prove that I'm better than everybody else, the only way to do that is through submissions, not to win by advantage or 2 points. So I always went for submissions.
So you brought up Holes and Rickson. They were kind of like the family champions, so to speak, coming up when they were competing. So how much of an inspiration did you take from them? Obviously, like, the philosophy of going for the submission was big, but what other lessons did they impart on you that you brought into your matches?
Perseverance, they were masters of the art. They really excel in what they did. So, I had my heroes were inside my family, like Halls, my father, Carlos, Carson. I took all the champions in my family, and I had them as my biggest example, especially as a kid. When I was looking, I was like, I want to achieve that level.
So your submission rate was obviously extremely impressive. You submitted the majority of opponents that you fought, but you also brought up your defense. And there were a lot of matches where you started off behind, but came back and ended up getting the submission. So how did you go about developing that defense, and how important do you think that was to your success in getting the submissions that you got?
I mean, my defense played a big role on my game, but I think, as a jiu-jitsu fighter, you have to be complete. You cannot have gaps in your game. And, if you have a bad defense in any situation, that's a gap that can be explored. So, and at some point in your life, you're going to find yourself in that position. If you compete regularly, you're always going to be in some position that you're not familiar with. So you have to be prepared for that. And that comes in the academy. I've always tried to prepare myself for any situation. So some people, they don't like to practice defense because, you're putting yourself in a position that you're about to be submitted. But that's the only way to know how to escape. Because in the middle of the fight, once you're there, you don't have time to think. I think it happens too fast. So it's all the preparation that you've done that will kick in, automatically. You have to do it instantaneously. If you start thinking too much, and then, you get delayed, the situation pass, and you lose. So that comes preparation. It's extremely important not to train just guard. I think people, when they want to the thing about competing in the tournaments, the first thing they train is just guard, either your guard player or your top player. And that's when they focus most of the energy. They don't practice escaping from the back or escaping from the mount. All the situation that is just as important as it is to guard. Of course, guard is usually the situation that you spend most of your time, but once you're out of that, you have to know what to do. And a lot of the top jiu-jitsu competitors, they don't. So a lot of them, they have a very bad defense. When somebody passes the guard or somebody mounts or takes the back, they see themselves in big trouble.
So you mentioned you put yourself in those bad positions a lot during training. Was that a big part of the time that you spent training on the mat, where you're trying to put yourself in specific positions so you could practice more in those spots?
Every position you can think of it, I was there. Like, one of my training sessions with Braulio, Braulio Stima, I used to train a lot with him. It was one of the main training partners, especially when I moved to London, to the UK. And Braulio has amazing triangle. It was one of his main weapons, and a few times, it was me and him in the mat, after towards the end of the session, I said, okay, Braulio, now we're gonna start, let's practice that defense. And, we start the triangle full on, like as tight as you can be, and a few times during a few of my matches, I end up in a triangle. And, I escaped, thankful, because of the training I was doing, starting with the triangle full on, like what to do, like full on, like, your eyes are popping out. But, you have to, you have to start with, in the worst position you can be. For once you get there, you know a way out, which I think people try to avoid, because then it comes ego. Nobody likes to tap, especially in the academy. There's a lot of ego inside the academy. You don't want to trap for your training partners, but it's part of the journey. You have to, you cannot just win. You have to know, how to escape. You have to know some bad positions, and a lot of the times it goes wrong. You're practicing, you're not fighting. A lot of the times you're trying things, and it goes wrong until you know exactly what to do. So it's, you have to leave the ego outside, which I think I always try, but not a lot of people do,
So in 2004, you made the world's absolute final. You fought Jacare, put him in a really, really tight armbar. His arm looked like it was injured, but he didn't tap, and you ended up losing that match. So can you talk about that match and how that changed your approach to matches going forward?
I think the one thing that match taught me, go for chokes, not for locks. No, it's true. I think, after that fight, I think I will start focusing my priorities a lot more in chokes than in locks, because, locks people, they can choose not to tap, like Jacare did. He chose not to tap, the fight carry on. Even like foot, how many times you see people, letting the foot break and carry on the match, hurting the knee. But the neck, once it's on, there's no resistance. You tap, So I think definitely that fight made a big impact of me, trying to go for chokes more than locks, for sure.
So the mounted cross choke became your signature move. So can you talk about developing that choke and how you made that position so effective? It seemed like anytime you got to the mount, you were able to finish with that mounted choke.
Yeah, I think, Jiu-Jitsu is a progressive fight system. From the guard, you go side control, and side control you try to mount or take the back. And that was always the natural progression, Jiu-Jitsu. Once you pass the guard, you have to mount. And then once you're in a mount, it's the best position that you can ever be to try to submit someone. It's not from the guard, it's not from anywhere else. It's either in the mount or in the back. So once you're there, the next step is only the submission. There is no more, position to try to achieve. So, again, that's how I saw Jiu-Jitsu. So training, whatever I'm doing, that's where you want to be, for them to submit someone. That's why, most of my submissions, they ever came, some from close guard too, but most of them, like over 90% of the time, either from the back or from the mount. Because I try to get to that position before I can, try to submit my opponent or focus in the submission. So, and then, it become a very strong part of my game. Once you can maintain the mount or the back for long enough to, to finish your opponent.
So I want to talk a bit about the World Championships. You competed in your first few World Championships in Brazil at the Tijuca Tennis Club, and then the event moved to the Walter Pyramid in Long Beach, California. So can you talk about that transition and what you felt that did for not only you, but also just for Jiu-Jitsu in general?
I think you could see the evolution of Jiu-Jitsu. Back in the days when we used to have the worlds at the Tijuca Tennis Club, which is a small event, it fit, I think maybe 2,000 spectators, and the ring was right on where the spectators stay, so the pressure of the crowd, like people were shouting like 1 meter away from the mat, and there was like hundreds of people. So there's a lot of pressure for sure. Fighting at the Tijuca Tennis Club, I think that it was a big part of the jiu-jitsu community to have the jiu-jitsu there. I won't say it was bad. I think, it was good to leave that part of jiu-jitsu, but also when jiu-jitsu came to California, and then suddenly went from being in a small arena when people like right in your face, everyone shouting, suddenly we're in the pyramid, when you have like a lot of space, people are not so close to the mat to have a lot of large area to warm up. I think it was, in terms of size, it was completely different experience when you went to America, and now look where we are. Looking back what jiu-jitsu when it used to be, 20 years ago, and what it is today, it's unbelievable.
You had some absolutely incredible performances throughout your career at the Pyramid. I believe it was 2009 when you got all submissions, both your weight class and the open class division. Can you talk about that event that year and just how special that was for you to be able to not only get submissions in all your matches, but do it against some legends in the sport?
Yeah, I think, that was 2009 was not the last, but the one before last tournament I've ever competed. And I think that it was showing the evolution of my jiu-jitsu, when I was able to mount in every single opponent I've fought. I finished all my opponents in the mount position. Not all in the cross collar choke, but every single one from the mount position. And I think, as I see in terms of like skills and what I was able to get, there was no better feeling, than you fight in a tournament and submitting all your opponents. I think that's, it's an awesome feeling.
So you not only had some incredible performances, like we said, throughout your whole career in Tijuca, in the Pyramid, and your last World Championship was in 2010. So can you talk about that experience and what made you decide to make that be your last World Championship and how that tournament went in 2010?
Yeah, because in the last few years that I was competing in Jiu-Jitsu, I was also doing MMA. I think my first MMA fight was in 2006. So during those 4 years, I was able to still compete in Jiu-Jitsu. Last, I was only fighting the worlds, but I was actually training for MMA, And it's really difficult to do both at the same time. I've never seen any other fighter that was able to compete in Jiu-Jitsu and in MMA at the same time. When they go for MMA, they stop competing in Jiu-Jitsu because it's very difficult to keep a technical level, especially the training, with the gi and without the gi. MMA, you have to do wrestling, kickboxing, boxing, and it's very difficult. So I try as much as I could. And in the last 2 World Championships that I competed, actually, I had an MMA fight, I think 3 weeks before. So I fell a lot on my body. It wasn't easy. So I asked myself, like, why should I put myself in a risk? It's not worth it. And then like after 2010, I kind of felt, I've done everything I could in Jiu-Jitsu. So now, I think I was 29 or 30 years old. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use those last few years that I have as an athlete to fully dedicate in MMA now, which I wasn't doing before. And then I decided to stop.
So since 2010, Jiu-Jitsu's grown quite a bit. Can you comment on how much the sport has grown and how it's changed since you last competed?
Yeah, I think you see the sheer size of the Jiu-Jitsu today. It's massive. On my time, we didn't have this. We had the pyramids, which was already like an awesome step up from Brazil. But now see Jiu-Jitsu the way it is now. the number of schools we have all over the world, the number of practitioners, competitors, the number of tournaments we have. You know, we have like tournaments every single weekend, more than one time, all over the world. You know, like IBJJF is doing, you know, I don't know, almost 100 events all over the world. And before there was like 5. On my time, there was Brazilian nationals, Pan Americans, the worlds, and the national by team. I think there was like 4 tournaments that the IBJJF was doing. So those are the tournaments that used to compete every year. Now you can fight every single weekend the whole year, you know, and it's, you know, you see the number of academies we have and practitioners. I mean, I don't think anyone ever thought Jiu-Jitsu was going to be what it is today.
Thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your knowledge and your experience. We really, really appreciate it. Hope to see you again and talk soon.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you, guys.